What if the very things you resist are the things keeping you stuck? We are taught to chase, to cling, to build happiness like a fortress against the uncertainties of life. But deep down, you know the truth. Happiness isn't found by gripping harder. It's built by letting go of the illusions that cloud your mind. You might feel like you're fighting invisible battles every day. The fear of judgment, the need for approval, the endless comparison to others, the constant weight of expectations that were never really yours. You're not alone in this. Every one of us walks through these quiet storms, wrestling with doubts we rarely dare to name out loud. Today, we're not here to sugarcoat life or offer hollow motivation. We're here to uncover the deeper truths, the harsh but liberating realities that Stoic philosophy teaches, realities that once embraced, quietly transform the way you see yourself, others, and the world around you. Through 9 powerful lessons rooted in resilience, emotional clarity, and self-mastery, you'll discover that a happy life isn't granted by luck or talent. It's built by choosing courage over comfort, truth over illusion, and action over fear. If these words already speak to something restless inside you, stay with me. Hit subscribe if you find value here, and feel free to share your own story below, because the path to living fully and freely begins not with denial, but with the boldness to accept what is. One, you're not that important, and that's freeing. There's a strange kind of freedom hidden behind a truth most people spend their lives trying to avoid. You're not the center of everyone's attention. It sounds almost like an insult the first time you hear it. But when you sit with it long enough, you realize it's one of the most liberating truths you could ever accept. We live in a world where appearances seem to matter more than reality, where the slightest misstep feels like a permanent stain on our identity, where we imagine crowds of unseen critics tracking our every move, every mistake, every failure. Yet the real world is far less interested in us than we think. Most people are too preoccupied battling their own fears, managing their own insecurities, and navigating their own private struggles to spend much time worrying about yours. Once you see this clearly, the weight of imagined judgment begins to lift from your shoulders, and you can finally start living with a quieter, deeper kind of strength. Understanding that you are not that important doesn't diminish your value. It sharpens your focus. It brings you back to your real work, not crafting a perfect image for others to admire, but building an authentic life for yourself to inhabit. You stop replaying awkward conversations in your mind late at night. You stop measuring your worth based on the fleeting approval of people who barely understand the battles you're fighting. And you stop wasting your energy defending your choices to those who were never truly invested in your journey. In this, Stoic philosophy finds its voice. It reminds us that our peace cannot be anchored to the shifting tides of other people's opinions. True peace, true personal growth, demands emotional boundaries that allow you to walk through the world with clarity and quiet confidence, no longer pulled in every direction by invisible strings you were never meant to carry. Think about how much life we lose when we imagine we're always being watched. Opportunities slip through our fingers because we fear looking foolish. Dreams wither because we fear falling short in public. Conversations die in our throats because we fear saying the wrong thing. We shrink ourselves, editing our every move to fit a crowd that, in reality, is too busy worrying about themselves to care. But if you could release that illusion, if you could step onto the stage of your own life without obsessing over the audience, how much more fully would you show up? How many risks would you finally dare to take? How much richer and more honest would your relationships become? The quiet truth is that most people forget your mistakes far faster than you do. They move on. So should you. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the mightiest empire of his time, understood this better than most. He reminded himself daily that the external world neither knows nor cares about our internal anxieties. It's not cruelty, it's reality, and it's a gift. Because once you stop performing for the world, you start performing for something much deeper, your own soul. You begin to act not out of fear, but out of principle. You speak, not to impress, but to express what you know is right. You choose not what looks good, but what feels true. And in doing so, you carve out a life that isn't polished for appearances, but rooted in resilience. This truth demands emotional self-discipline. It demands you stop chasing outcomes you can't control and start controlling the one thing you always can: your own focus, your own energy, your own voice. It demands you stop sacrificing your authentic self at the altar of invisible expectations. When you let go of needing to be important, you reclaim your freedom to be present, purposeful, and profoundly human. You stand a little taller, not because you are grander than others, but because you are no longer shackled by their imagined gaze. In a world desperate for applause, you become something quieter, rarer, stronger. Someone who knows their worth without needing it confirmed. You are not that important, and that's not a curse. It's the beginning of your real life. 2. Not everyone will like you, and that's okay. There's a quiet kind of strength that grows the moment you stop needing universal approval. Somewhere along the way, we're taught that being good, successful, or worthy is tied to how many people like us, how many nods of agreement we collect, and how often we are accepted without question. But life, when lived honestly, was never meant to be a popularity contest. The reality is that no matter how kind, thoughtful, or intentional you are, some people will misunderstand you. Some will resist you simply because you no longer fit the version of you they're most comfortable with. Some will withdraw, criticize, or remain distant, and it will have nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with their perception, their expectations, and their own unspoken battles. When you truly see this, not in anger but in clarity, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of performing for acceptance. Accepting that not everyone will like you is essential, because it reclaims the energy you've unknowingly given away. Every time you bend your truth to fit into someone else's comfort zone, every time you silence your instincts to avoid discomfort, every time you sacrifice your voice for the sake of temporary approval, you chip away at your own foundation. Over time, you no longer recognize yourself, not because you changed for the better, but because you abandoned the parts of you that mattered most. True happiness and resilience require a kind of emotional detachment, a deliberate decision to value truth over applause, alignment over admiration, inner peace over outer validation. This is where Stoic acceptance breathes life into daily practice, teaching you that your responsibility is not to be liked, but to live aligned with your principles and to walk with your own integrity. Even if it means walking alone sometimes. You don't have to create conflict. You don't have to provoke or alienate others deliberately. In fact, authenticity often requires more compassion, more understanding, more emotional control than simply blending in. But you do have to accept the discomfort that sometimes rises when you no longer fit into the easy, agreeable role others had cast you in. Growth is uncomfortable for those who prefer you small, silent, and predictable. And your path forward will naturally sift your relationships, revealing who sees your spirit, not just your surface, who honors your boundaries, not just your convenience, who loves you for your essence, not for how much you reflect their expectations back to them. When you stop trying to be universally liked, something unexpected happens. The right people find you. The ones who resonate with your honesty, who challenge you without trying to change you, who encourage your growth, even when it pulls you into new territory. These connections are rare, but they are worth everything, and they cannot be built if you are busy diluting yourself to avoid discomfort. Imagine walking into a room and no longer needing everyone's silent approval. Imagine speaking a hard truth kindly but firmly, without bracing for rejection. Imagine choosing a path that feels right in your soul, even if it earns you fewer cheers. That's not arrogance, that's emotional maturity. It's the quiet confidence Stoicism has always pointed toward, the calm acceptance that your peace does not require universal agreement. You will not be everyone's favorite person. You were never meant to be. You are not here to live in constant emotional negotiation with the world around you. You are here to live your truth fully, to embrace your imperfections openly, to offer your best without needing constant affirmation that it's enough. Once you stop chasing the moving target of approval, you can start building the kind of life that doesn't collapse every time someone disapproves. And in that life, there is something far more valuable than being liked by all. There is freedom. 3. You are not what you have. It's easy to forget, in a world obsessed with status and appearance, that what you own is not who you are. The car you drive, the house you live in, the clothes you wear, the title on your business card, they are reflections of circumstance, not reflections of your soul. Yet without realizing it, many people begin to stitch their self-worth to these external markers, believing that success, love, or even happiness can be secured by accumulating more. But the truth is far more grounding and far more liberating. Real value is not attached to what you possess, but to how you live when the noise fades away and the world stops clapping. Attaching your identity to your possessions is dangerous because it places your sense of self on ground that shifts with every market crash, every job loss, every comparison you make with a neighbor, a colleague, or a stranger on a screen. You live in a state of constant vulnerability, not because life is fragile, but because you've allowed things outside your control to define your stability. Stoic philosophy pulls this illusion into the light and asks a harsher, braver question. If you lost it all tomorrow, would you still know who you are? Would your integrity remain intact? Would your principles still guide you when the applause is gone and the spotlight moves on? The foundation of personal growth, especially in Stoic living, is built on recognizing that wealth is not a number in your bank account, nor a square footage on a deed. It is the strength of your character, the resilience of your mind, the steadiness of your soul in the face of both success and hardship. Seneca, who knew both riches and ruin, wrote that true poverty lies not in having little, but in craving much. When you are always chasing the next thing, the bigger house, the newer car, the higher position, you are not building a life. You are building a trap, one that closes tighter the more you feed it. Freedom, the kind that Stoicism teaches, comes not from endless acquisition, but from deliberate detachment. The ability to enjoy good fortune without needing it to validate your worth. Imagine living with the quiet confidence that no loss can erase your dignity. Imagine walking into any room knowing that what matters most cannot be seen by the eye, but felt in the way you speak, the way you act, the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. That kind of presence cannot be bought. It must be earned. It grows slowly, built from countless small moments, when you choose principle over popularity, depth over display, resilience over recognition. It's what makes a person truly magnetic, not the clothes they wear, but the authenticity they embody. In daily life, this truth demands courage. It means resisting the subtle pressure to measure your days by external achievements. It means asking tougher questions. Am I building a life that looks good or a life that feels good? Am I spending my time chasing validation or am I aligning with values that outlast the trends? It also means facing discomfort without running to the nearest distraction, holding space for moments of doubt, sadness, or uncertainty without trying to buy, earn, or post your way out of them. You are not what you have. You are how you think when no one else is speaking. You are how you treat people who have nothing to offer you. You are the promises you keep when it would be easier to walk away. And when you build your life on these foundations, no storm can take it away. The world will always offer new ways to measure yourself by shallow standards, but you do not have to accept the offer. You are something quieter, stronger, deeper, and no one can sell that to you because it was always yours to claim. 4. You always have a choice, even when life feels out of control. There will be seasons when life strikes without warning, when the ground beneath you seems to shift faster than you can steady yourself, when losses pile up and the dreams you built with quiet hope seem to fracture in your hands. In those moments, it's easy to believe you are powerless, that circumstances have written your fate, that you are nothing more than the collateral damage of a crueler world. But even then, even when everything feels broken, a choice still remains. It may not be the choice to change the event itself, but it is always the choice of how you will meet it, whether you will collapse into bitterness or rise into something stronger, something more aligned with the life you still have the power to shape. Recognizing that you always have a choice is essential because it restores the one thing hardship tries hardest to steal from you, your agency. When you surrender your response, you surrender your identity. Stoic philosophy sharpens this truth like a blade, teaching that external chaos does not dictate internal collapse unless you allow it. You cannot always control the losses, the betrayals, the abrupt endings, but you can control whether they harden you into resentment or sharpen you into resilience. You can choose whether your setbacks become tombstones or stepping stones. You can decide, moment by moment, whether your story ends with defeat or deepened character. Life does not ask you to be invincible. It asks you to be intentional. When everything feels like it's spiraling beyond your reach, you still control your breath, your words, your focus, and your next small action. And those small choices, when made with discipline and emotional clarity, quietly become the architecture of a rebuilt life. You choose whether to pause instead of reacting blindly. You choose whether to speak the truth even when silence feels easier. You choose whether to forgive, not because the past deserved it, but because your future does. You choose whether to hold the broken pieces with hatred or with grace. The truth is, most people are not trapped by their circumstances. They are trapped by the belief that they have no options left. That belief is a lie, whispered by fear, amplified by exhaustion, but a lie nonetheless. Even in the hardest seasons, you can choose meaning over misery. You can choose purpose over paralysis. You can choose to show up fully for your life, even when it no longer looks like the life you planned. And in doing so, you reclaim not just your hope, but your power. There are moments when the only thing you can choose is to take the next breath without despair. There are mornings when the victory is simply getting up, facing the world again without bitterness hardening your heart. These small, unseen acts of courage are not insignificant. They are the foundations of inner strength, the quiet proof that even when life roars around you, you still command the most important battlefield: your mind. The storms will come. The losses will sting. The seasons of uncertainty will stretch longer than you think you can endure. But if you can hold on to this simple, grounding truth, that you are never without a choice, you will endure them not just by surviving, but by transforming. The Stoics knew this. They lived it not in comfort, but in hardship. And if you choose, you can live it too. Because no matter what life takes away, what remains will always be enough to begin again. 5. Your thoughts create your reality. Every experience you live is filtered through the lens of your thoughts. Not through facts alone, not through the pure weight of circumstances, but through the quiet and often unquestioned narratives running inside your mind. Two people can face the same setback. One sees a dead end, the other sees a redirection. Two people can stand before the same opportunity. One is paralyzed by fear of failure, the other ignited by possibility. The difference is not in what happens to them, but in what they tell themselves about what happens. Your thoughts, silent and invisible as they are not passive observers. They are the architects of your emotional reality, the quiet builders of your internal world. Understanding this matters because most of the suffering you experience does not arise from the raw facts of your life, but from the interpretations you place upon them. A Stoic mindset brings this into sharp focus. It calls you to realize that while you may not choose every event, you do choose the story you build around it. You choose whether a mistake becomes a permanent brand of inadequacy or a single valuable lesson. You choose whether a betrayal becomes the end of trust forever or the beginning of wiser discernment. These choices are not always obvious, and they rarely feel easy, but they are always available to you if you are willing to slow down, observe your mind, and take responsibility for what you cultivate there. In practice, this means developing emotional resilience, not by forcing yourself to feel good all the time, but by disciplining the meanings you assign to what you feel. It means catching the inner voice that whispers, "I'll never recover," and asking calmly, "Is that true? Or just fear speaking again?" It means noticing when you spiral into worst-case scenarios and reminding yourself that the mind's tendency to predict disaster is not the same thing as reality itself. It means training your mental habits with the same consistency and care you would train your body if you wanted it to grow strong and capable. What you feed your mind, day after day, thought after thought, becomes the environment you live inside. Reality, as the Stoics taught, is often neutral. It is neither good nor bad until our minds shape it. When you look through a lens of bitterness, everything will feel like an attack. When you look through a lens of resilience, everything becomes a field for growth. When you choose to see setbacks as sharpening tools rather than final verdicts, you begin to reclaim power over what most people surrender to circumstance. This is not about wearing rose-colored glasses or pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let pain be the only thing you see. In real life, this practice demands patience. It means when you face rejection, you do not immediately brand yourself a failure. It means when you face uncertainty, you do not immediately assume disaster. It means giving yourself the grace to be human, to feel fear, to feel loss, but also the strength to question whether those feelings have earned the authority to define your future. Every time you pause between stimulus and response, every time you interrupt a destructive thought with a grounding one, every time you choose belief in resilience over surrender to despair, you are quietly remaking your inner world into a place where peace can survive even in chaos. You may not be able to choose everything that happens to you, but you can always choose what happens inside you. Your mind is the foundation upon which your happiness is built or broken. Guard it, train it, strengthen it, because the thoughts you allow to stay are the bricks that build the life you end up living. 6. Blame steals your power. Blame feels comforting at first because it gives us a simple story for our pain. It hands us an easy villain, someone or something outside ourselves to point to and say, "This is why I'm stuck." But the deeper truth is that blame, no matter how justified it may seem, always trades your power for temporary relief. Every time you blame, you hand over the keys to your future. You chain your growth to forces beyond your control and quietly convince yourself that change is impossible until someone else acts differently. And without realizing it, you stand still, waiting for someone else to fix what only you can heal. Understanding how blame robs you matters, because freedom is built on responsibility. Responsibility is not about self-punishment or accepting blame for things you did not cause. It is about refusing to give anyone else the final word on who you can become. Stoic philosophy makes this distinction with ruthless clarity. The events of life are external, but your response is your own. You are not responsible for being hurt, betrayed, or overlooked, but you are responsible for what you choose to do with that pain. Blame keeps you circling the injury. Responsibility moves you beyond it. In everyday life, it's easy to slip into blame without even noticing. You might tell yourself that your boss ruined your career, that your upbringing damaged your confidence, that the economy crushed your dreams. These stories have threads of truth, but when they become the entire narrative, they trap you. They turn pain into identity. They encourage passivity disguised as realism. Yet if you look closer, there is always a choice still standing quietly in the background. The choice to respond differently, to build something new, to decide that you are not finished, simply because life knocked you down once or even many times. Taking ownership of your life does not mean denying injustice or hardship. It means refusing to let them write the last chapter. It means saying, "This happened, and now it is my responsibility to rise." It means asking hard questions without flinching. Where have I been waiting for someone else to give me permission to move forward? Where have I been hiding behind blame because it feels safer than risking failure? Where am I still telling the same old story when a new story is begging to be written? These are not comfortable questions. They demand emotional self-discipline, humility, and the willingness to confront your own patterns without excuses. But they are the questions that turn stagnation into momentum. In a world that encourages outrage and victimhood at every turn, choosing responsibility is a quiet act of rebellion. It is a commitment to stop wasting energy on what you cannot control and start investing it fully into what you can. Your habits, your mindset, your boundaries, your next decision. And with every small step away from blame, you begin to feel something you may have thought was lost. Your strength. Your ability to shape your life from the inside out, regardless of how others behave. Your freedom to define success by your own values, not by circumstances beyond your reach. Blame might feel like a shelter from the storm, but it is a prison with invisible bars. Responsibility might feel at first like standing naked in the rain, vulnerable and uncertain, but it is the only way to step into the sunlight again. You were never meant to live as a prisoner of the past. You were meant to be the builder of what comes next. And the moment you stop blaming, the foundation for that new life begins to rise, steady and unshakable under your own feet. 7. Growth will cost you relationships, and that's part of the journey. There comes a point on the path of growth where you realize that not everyone who started with you will finish with you. It is one of the most painful, confusing, and ultimately freeing truths you will face. As you evolve, as you sharpen your emotional boundaries, as you commit to living with greater authenticity and emotional resilience, some relationships will naturally fall away. Not because you stopped caring, and not because they stopped mattering, but because growth demands change, and not everyone around you is ready or willing to change with you. Accepting this reality is not a betrayal of loyalty. It is an act of respect for your own journey and for theirs. Understanding that growth will cost you relationships matters because it protects you from the illusion that progress can happen without friction. Every step you take toward building a life of deeper integrity, every move you make to set clearer emotional boundaries, every silent act of reclaiming your personal power inevitably shifts the dynamics around you. People who are comfortable with your smaller self may feel threatened by your expansion, not out of malice but out of fear. Fear that your evolution reflects their stagnation. Fear that closeness will now demand uncomfortable self-reflection. Some will try to pull you back into old patterns. Others will drift away in quiet resentment or growing distance. The Stoics understood this tension and taught that while we must practice compassion, we must also remain loyal to our highest path, even if it requires walking it with fewer companions. In real life, this plays out in moments both big and small. You begin speaking more honestly, and the people who thrived on your silence become uneasy. You start pursuing goals that require discipline and emotional clarity, and those who prefer your distractions feel abandoned. You stop laughing at jokes that no longer align with your values, and suddenly the room feels colder. These are not accidents. They are signs that the unspoken contracts of your relationships, contracts that said, stay the same so we can stay comfortable, are being renegotiated, whether others consent to it or not. And though it hurts, it is necessary. Because every time you diminish yourself to keep the peace, you trade a piece of your future for the comfort of the past. Every time you stay small to avoid unsettling the people around you, you anchor yourself to a version of life that no longer fits who you are becoming. Growth means letting go, not in bitterness, not in anger, but with a quiet, firm understanding that your loyalty belongs first to the truth of your own evolution. It means honoring the connections that can withstand your change, while gracefully releasing the ones that cannot. This path is not easy. It demands emotional self-discipline, deep self-respect, and the resilience to stand in the silence that sometimes follows a season of change. But it also opens the door to something better. Relationships rooted in acceptance rather than expectation, in encouragement rather than control. The ones who stay, the ones who grow with you, will not ask you to shrink to make them feel safe. They will not punish you for changing. They will celebrate it, even when it challenges them. And those are the connections worth building your next chapter around. You are not here to stay small to keep others comfortable. You are here to become the fullest, truest expression of the life within you. If growth costs you relationships that cannot honor, it is not a loss. It is a clearing, making space for the kind of connections your future self deserves. Let the old fall away with gratitude. Step forward without guilt. You are not abandoning anyone. You are finally choosing yourself. 8. There is no perfect time to start. The mind loves to wait. It clings to the idea that clarity will come later, that courage will appear tomorrow, that someday, when you're more prepared, less afraid, more financially stable, more emotionally ready, then it will be time. But life doesn't operate on that schedule. Growth does not wait for convenience, and progress doesn't check whether you feel ready before knocking. The belief that there is a perfect time to begin is a beautiful lie, one that keeps people frozen in place for months, years, sometimes forever. The hard truth is this: the right time is rarely obvious, often uncomfortable, and almost never convenient. But it's always now. You wait because you think waiting will make it easier. That time will do the heavy lifting for you. That somehow, if you delay just a little longer, the fear will go away on its own. But fear doesn't evaporate with time, it embeds itself deeper. The longer you delay action, the more your mind begins to equate stillness with safety and movement with danger. Stoic philosophy challenges this avoidance head-on, not by ignoring fear, but by choosing action in spite of it. It teaches that readiness isn't a prerequisite for action, it's a result of it. That clarity comes not from overthinking, but from doing. That strength is not something you wait to feel. It's something you generate by taking the first imperfect step. In the quiet corners of your life, there are decisions you've been postponing, conversations left unsaid, projects you keep revisiting in your mind but never commit to, dreams you've buried beneath layers of doubt and practicality. You tell yourself the time just isn't right. But the truth is, you're waiting for a feeling that will never come. Not because you're broken, but because fear always shows up when the path ahead leads to real change. And if you continue to wait for that fear to leave, you'll wait yourself into a life that never really began. This isn't about reckless urgency. It's about recognizing that waiting becomes a habit, that indecision becomes identity, that hesitation hardens into regret. When you start now, not in perfection, not with a master plan, but simply with what you have, you shift the momentum of your life. The first action, however small, breaks the inertia. The first word written, the first phone call made, the first morning you choose discipline over distraction. That's where everything starts to shift. That's where confidence is born, not from guarantees, but from movement. Growth requires self-discipline, not perfect timing. And often what looks like a lack of opportunity is simply a lack of initiation. Waiting for a clear sign, a smoother path, a version of yourself that feels braver and stronger and more certain is just another way to avoid the discomfort that all meaningful progress demands. The Stoics understood this. They taught that time is not something we own. It's something we spend, moment by moment, with or without awareness. And every delay is a withdrawal from a future that could have been different. If only you had acted sooner. Start now. Not because it's easy, not because the fear is gone, but because your life will not wait. The sooner you begin, the sooner you become the person your future needs. You don't have to be ready. You only have to be willing. And once you take that first imperfect step, you'll realize that readiness was never the door. It was what waited on the other side of your decision to walk through. 9. Fear will always be there, but it doesn't get to drive. Fear is not a flaw to fix. It's not a sign that you're weak, broken, or unworthy. It is simply part of being alive. No matter how much you grow, how strong you become, or how deeply you practice emotional resilience, fear will still ride in the back seat of your life. The problem is not fear itself. The problem begins when you give it the wheel. When you let it dictate your choices, shrink your voice, and set the boundaries of your future. Understanding that fear is inevitable, but not sovereign, is essential if you want to live with the kind of inner strength that Stoic philosophy calls us toward. Fear matters because it reveals what matters. It sharpens the edges of the life you are meant to live. It appears most ferociously when you are closest to doing something real, something honest, something that stretches the edges of your identity. Fear's voice grows louder, not because you are on path, but because you are standing at the threshold of genuine change. Yet most people hear that voice and step back. They mistake the presence of fear as a stop sign rather than what it really is, a marker that they are finally moving beyond the comfortable and the familiar. The Stoics never taught that courage was the absence of fear. They knew better. Courage, they insisted, is the decision to move anyway. Fear tells you to protect what you already have. Courage dares you to reach for something bigger than your current safety. Fear whispers all the reasons why you'll fail, why you'll fall short, why you'll lose what little you have. But courage reminds you that without risking failure, you also forfeit the chance at real success. The kind measured not just in external achievements, but in the quiet integrity of living aligned with your true nature. In everyday life, this truth plays out in the choices most people never see. The moment you speak up when staying silent would be easier. The decision to apply for a role you feel unqualified for. The willingness to set a boundary even when you fear losing someone's approval. The commitment to build something new, even though you know it might fail. These small, hidden acts of courage are the foundation of a life shaped by self-mastery, not by emotional surrender. And the more you practice them, the less power fear has. Not because it disappears, but because you stop mistaking its volume for its authority. Fear is part of the conversation, but it doesn't get a vote. It doesn't set the agenda. It doesn't decide the direction. Your values, your principles, your quiet commitment to growth, these are the hands that belong on the wheel. And every time you choose action aligned with who you want to become, rather than what you fear wants you to remain, you strengthen your emotional resilience. You move closer to becoming the person who can navigate uncertainty with a calm mind and a steady heart. The truth is, if you wait for fear to vanish before you begin, you will wait forever. But if you learn to move with fear, sitting silently in the passenger seat, you reclaim the freedom to live fully. You will never outrun fear, but you can outgrow its influence. You can let it be present without letting it paralyze you. You can recognize its voice without obeying its commands. And when you do, you will find a life waiting for you on the other side of hesitation. A life built not on avoidance, but on quiet, unshakable strength. A happy life isn't something you stumble into by luck or chance. It's something you build, choice by choice, thought by thought, with a mind willing to accept what is real rather than chase what is comfortable. Today we walk through 9 harsh truths. Truths that might sting at first, but when embraced, create the kind of resilience that Stoic philosophy has taught for centuries. You are not defined by what you have. You are not here to please everyone. You are not trapped unless you believe you are. Your strength lies in reclaiming emotional control, setting boundaries with quiet dignity, and letting go of the illusions that weigh you down. The world will continue to shift around you. Fear will still whisper. Challenges will still come. But if you choose to live with clarity, courage, and emotional self-mastery, you will build a life that feels strong from the inside out. One that doesn't collapse under pressure. One that grows deeper with time. If any of these truths spoke to your experience, I invite you to share your reflections or your own story in the comments below. You never know who might find strength through your voice. Remember, you don't have to be perfect to start living better. You only have to be willing to see clearly and choose bravely.